Yeah, I've been watching
All right,
some
let me
pennies.
pass this out.
Please.
I've been watching them fly right out of my bank account.
They got it. I need to come and prepare with my life.
Yeah,
And I believe just, you know,
thank you.
I'm going to use mine.
Yes.
My wife ordered this, this thing from Israel, and this is the one to go to the temple.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Smell it, smell it. It's got everything in it, all the aroma and everything. The front tags and everything else.
Oops, something
It's
fell.
okay, I got it here.
Oh, yeah. It smells wonderful. I think it's what a mix of spikenard, frankincense, and myrrh. Oh, that's wonderful. Very good. That's a wonderful smell.
Bring it down here, maybe we can pray and we can run to the body here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
God will bless all of us.
Amen.
So,
Yeah.
we get down, we can do that.
Amen. Shalom Noach. You know, all right. So we're getting into our TeNaKh study, our study of the weekly Parsha, and we are in our 3-year reading cycle that we're here using at synagogue. We are in Parshat Team, and I believe we're in actually the second portion of that, and that's in chapter 22 of Sefer Shemot, the book of Genesis. And that starts in verse 25. So chapter 22, verse 25, going to chapter 23, verse 33 for our reading today. And we'll begin by
22-25?
blessing Hashem here first. It begins in, chapter 22, verse 25 of the book of Shemot, Exodus. All right. Chapter 22, verse 25 is where we're going to begin. Okay, guys. Oh, Aria, pass it down.
None of them were sitting down, and I asked them. They ran upset.
Okay, so does everybody get okay. Okay. Karen, don't.
I was holding that
Smell
for
those.
him.
Okay, guys, careful. We're on the table, Mr. Henry. Let's bless. You don't. You did well.
He's in the house.
Okay, after you bless, you please begin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pori ha'gafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'dvarei Torah. Amen. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us through his commandments and has commanded us to be occupied with the words of the Torah. We thank you, Father, for this opportunity. Each time that we have the opportunity to come together and open up your word amongst brothers and sisters, to study it, Father. Father, we love you. We just want to know you more, Father. I pray that this would be an acceptable form and act of worship as we seek to diligently learn more about you and to be able to please you, Father, and to have your words in our heart that we may also share them with others, your light, Father, that you've given to us. So, Father, we pray that this would be an acceptable offering. Father, we pray that you guide us, that you show us wondrous things from your holy Torah. Pray to hide it in our hearts. So we pray this and we bless you, Father, and it's in Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. Chaim Yeshua. Okay, guys, so for Parashat Mishpatim, again, we're on a 3-year reading cycle, so we're about middle of team as we are getting into Shemot, the book of Exodus, in chapter 22, verse 25. I'll go ahead and kick us off here for the first 5 verses. If you loan money to one of my people who is poor, you are not to deal with him as would a creditor, and you are not to charge him interest. If you take your neighbor's coat as collateral, you are to restore it to him by sundown. Because it is his only garment, he needs it to wrap his body. What else does he have in which to sleep? Moreover, if he cries out to me, I will listen, because I am compassionate. You are not to curse God, and you are not to curse a leader of your people. You are not to delay offering from your harvest of grain, olive oil, or wine. The firstborn of your sons you are to give to me. Anybody wants to pick up in verse 30?
You are to do the same with your oxen and your sheep. It is to stay with his mother 7 days, and on the 8th day you are to give it to me. You are to be my especially separated people. Therefore you are not to eat any flesh owned by wild animals in the countryside, rather throw it out for the dogs. You are not to repeat false rumors. Do not join hands with the wicked by offering perjured testimony. Do not follow the crowd when it does what is wrong. And don't allow the popular views to sway you into offering testimony for any cause if the effect will be to pervert justice. One more? Okay. On the other hand, don't favor a person's lawsuit simply because he is poor.
If you come upon your enemy's ox or donkey straying, you must return it to him. If you see the donkey which belongs to someone who hates you lying down, helpless under its load, you are not to pass him by, but to go and help him free it. Do not deny anyone justice in his lawsuit simply because he is poor. Keep away from fraud. Do not cause the death of the innocent and righteous. For I will not justify the wicked. You are not to receive a bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of the righteous.
You're not to oppress a foreigner, for you know how a foreigner feels since you were foreigners in the land of Egypt. For 6 years you are to sow your land with seed, and gather in its harvest. But the 7th year you are to let it rest and lie fallow, so that the poor among your people can eat, and what they leave the wild animals in the countryside can eat. Do the same with your vineyard and olive groves. For 6 days you are to work, but on the 7th you are to rest, so that your ox and donkey can rest, and your slave girl's son, and the foreigner be renewed. Pay attention to everything I have to say to you. Do not invoke the names of other gods, or even let them be heard crossing your lips. 3 times a year you are to observe a festival with me.
Keep the festival of Matzah 7 days as I ordered you. You are to eat matzah at the time determined in the month of Aviv, for it was in that month that you left Egypt. No one is to appear before me empty-handed. Next, the festival of harvest, the first fruits of your efforts sowing in the field, and the last, the festival of the ingathering, at the end of the year, when you gather in from the fields the results of your efforts. 3 times a year, all your men are to appear before the Lord Adonai. You are not to offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavened bread, nor is the fat of my festival to remain all night until morning. You are to bring the best first fruits of your land into the house of Adonai your God. You are not to boil a young animal in its mother's milk. And in sending an angel ahead of you to guard you on the way and bring you to the place I have prepared.
Pay attention to him, listen to what he says, and do not rebel against him, because he will not forgive any wrongdoing of yours, since my name resides in him. But if you listen to what he says and do everything I tell you, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and a foe to your foes. When my angel goes ahead of you and brings you to the Amori, Hittite, Pharisee, Canaanite, Hivi, and Yebusi, I'll make an end of them. You are not to worship their gods, serve them, or follow their practices. Rather, you are to demolish them completely and smash their singing stones to pieces. You are to serve Adonai your God, and he will bless your food and water. I will take sickness away from among you.
In your land, your woman will not miscarry or be barren, and you will live out the full span of your life. I will send terror of me ahead of you, throwing into confusion all the people to whom you come, and I will make all your enemies turn their backs on you. I will send hornets ahead of you to drive out the Hivi, Canaanite, and the Hittite from before you. I will not drive them out from before you in 1 year, which would cause the land to become desolate and wild animals too many for you. I will drive them out from before you gradually, until you have grown in number and can take possession of the land.
I will set your boundaries from the Sea of Suf to the Sea of the Philistine, and from the desert of the Euphrates River. For I will hand the inhabitants of the land over to you, and you will drive them out from before you. You are not to make a covenant with them or with their gods. They are not to live in your land, otherwise they will make you sin against me by ensnaring you to serve their gods. Is that the end?
Yep. Mm-hmm. All right. Great.
Trying to figure out where's it?
So we're going to go back to the beginning of our parsha to discuss it in Shemot, the book of Exodus, in chapter 22, verse 25, to the end of chapter 23. All kinds of various different mitzvot. I'm sure there won't be a dull moment, but I'll give you guys have the opportunity to comment on anything that interested you, anything if you have questions on, or any insights you might have to share about that particular portion.
Some of this mitzvah involves slavery, right?
I guess it depends on how someone looks at slavery. In Hebrew culture, many times the only way you could afford to learn a certain discipline or skill set was in a sense by indenturing yourself to a Hebrew that was more wealthy. So, for example, if you wanted to learn to be a doctor, things of that nature, many times the only way you could do that would be by, indebting yourself. And that was often what would happen. And so today, our culture is really not too different if you think about it. When people go to college, do they indebt themselves? Oh yeah. Don't think for a moment they're not slaves. They have to go to work to pay for that debt. So it was just a different system in many respects. But there were certain rights that the person who you indebted yourself had over you in the Torah. So, but you have to keep in mind also as we read through the Torah, the slave could go free. If the master got upset with you and whacked your tooth out, you know what? You get to go free, and your debt is, he has to take care of that. Or at the end of a certain amount of time, servitude, then you get to go free. And so it was obviously a little bit different, but in a lot of respects, God had mitzvot and guidelines and rules and commandments to protect those who had done that, who had indebted themselves, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, you do have situations where they would go to war and there would be foreigners, and that they would take to do their work and things of that nature. And that's a little bit different, but yep, that was something that was practiced. But often it's not the kind of slavery that we saw, in America in the early days. It's the way I understand it in most cases. It was, as I mentioned, it was more like you indebted yourself. And,
Yeah,
or you could have gotten in trouble and you had to pay a debt, right? So the Torah, you come before the Torah judges, and you stole something or you damaged something and you owe this big debt. How are you going to pay it? You know, you're going to go work it off. That's what you're going to do. You know. So.
yeah, I kind of use slavery is kind of like a hard term for.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you think of slavery, you get these different ideas, but you know, there wasn't a whole lot of jail systems in Israel. They had different ways of dealing with it, you know, different punishments and things of that nature. So that's a good question. Did you have a particular verse in mind in our portion regarding that?
Yeah, it's like verse 25 and 24. But
In chapter,
like
which chapter?
in chapter 22,
Oh, 22, I see, okay, sorry.
I mean, when you loan someone money, that person that's receiving the money is indebted as like kind of like a slave.
Yeah. Yeah, and so this is dealing with kind of loans. That might be a slightly different situation where you definitely are indebted. So if you loan money to one of my people who's poor, you're not to deal with them as you would a creditor. So, and of course, it's dealing with one of the children of Israel as part of the context. And so especially in the context who is poor, you're not supposed to charge him interest. In fact, there's other places where it says you should not charge, you know, when it comes to a fellow Israeli, you were in general not supposed to charge him interest when it came to a loan. So that would be something you would have to pay back. I think that's something that, you know, somebody that would go in debt over something, where they had to enter into servitude would be something much more substantial. And perhaps, you know, borrowing 1,000 shekels or something, you know.
So how does this relate to taking loans on like a car or a house?
Well, technically, if he's your fellow brother within or sister amongst Israel, and that can be verified, then, you know, if you agree to give the person a loan, you're not to charge him interest. That's technically the Torah law. So now there's other place where it does say that you may charge a foreigner interest. Let me see if I can find that passage. Foreigner interest.
You know that,
Go ahead.
in other words, I think what it says here, you know, like, say, one of you guys or somebody being my brother here in our family, here comes to me and says, Ron, hey, I'm in debt, I need some help. And I say, hey, how much you need? I say, like, I want to lose my house, whatever I need. $30,000, you know. If you're wealthy and you loan that person the $30,000, it's, in other words, when a person pays you back, it's not to charge a person interest.
Right.
But
Right.
if that person is poor, very, very poor, and then later on you can walk and say, hey, brother, you know, just forget it.
Right. Yeah. You could certainly do that. And in the Torah and other places says that, you know, if you have a brother that's poor among you, you know, they're living in poverty, and you know, obviously they can't take care of themselves. You know, if they have a legitimate need, you're supposed to, you know, lend to them. You know, and even if somebody, you know, if someone's poor and in poverty and they have no place to live, the Torah also says you shall give them a place to live.
Right.
So, but in either case, a brother, a normal brother of Israel or sister of Israel, you're not to charge them interest. So, you know, if you had that Torah law in effect and you had banks that gave loans and things of that nature, if the bank, you know, the people who owned the bank were fellow Israelites, they couldn't charge you interest according to Torah law. The other place that speaks of this is in Sefer Devarim, in the book of Deuteronomy, and in chapter 23, in verse 19, it says, "You are not to lend at interest to your brother." So this is the passage where it says, just in general, to your brother, you're not supposed to charge interest. It says, no matter whether the loan is of money, food, or anything else that can earn interest. It's a complete ban on charging your brother interest, according to the Torah. But in verse 20, it does say, to an outsider, you may lend at interest. And then it reiterates, but to your brother, you are not to lend at interest. So that Hashem your God will prosper you in everything you set out to do in the land you are entering in order to take possession of it. So that's maybe, let's just say, you live in land, you're just assuming all the people living in the land are serving the same God because that's how the Torah-based theocracy is set up. But you could charge the foreigners interest. So maybe, let's just say that all America was worshiping the one true God. It's not, obviously not, but let's just say it was. We couldn't charge each other interest, but we could charge China interest. We could charge, Russia, Mexico, all these different places, Canada, interest. And so the point being, with this Torah mitzvah that Hashem gives, as we read in this particular passage, is that Hashem will prosper you. It's so your nation will be prosperous.
Right.
Don't charge each other interest.
Right.
People try to make a buck off of each other, but the Torah says, don't do that. Loan, get paid back, but at the same time, by doing this, you're going to be prosperous people. Charge interest to those who are not your people. That's what the Torah says.
So dividends on an investment is not the same thing because you're buying a piece of a company. That's not interest. If I'm reading it.
Right,
if I
exactly.
The way
Yeah,
they
that's different. That's like being a business person.
So money invested in a 401k and you're earning money off of that, that's dividends, it's not interest. You're earning profits from the company.
Yeah, you're basically a business partner.
Right. So I've had people try to tell me that you can't have a 401k because you don't know if you're charging a believer interest. And I'm thinking, no, you're owning part of a company and you're drawing dividends.
It's a business proposition.
According to the verse 25, what Hashem is saying is talking about the poor.
Right, and in verse 25 in our chapter it is, yeah.
Talking about the poor.
Deuteronomy, the passage I just read, is in general.
Right.
Yeah.
The poor, period.
Yep, exactly. Yep, although it does say, if you loan money to one of my people,
Right.
who is poor. So my people would be one of the brethren of Israel. So, but oftentimes the Torah will repeat things, especially the most important ones. And so while you might have a mitzvah, that basically states the same thing, sometimes God will really focus and put, an emphasis on one particular mitzvah. And, he often puts a lot of emphasis on not misusing the poor and taking care of the poor. So this is just an expression of his heart when it comes to the poor.
What I thought was pretty cool, verse 30 through, I think about 19, it's basically explaining, when verse 30 it says, you are to be in my especially separate people, meaning, and then he goes and gives an example of what a separate people is like.
Right.
Until 19. Only then, after they become the separate people, or can they do the offerings and start doing it? I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And to reiterate, Amen is saying that he tells us about our characteristic, our status as his especially separated people. And then he gives us these mitzvot about what separates us, what makes us holy. And of course, when we are that holy people, we can come forth and bring him proper offerings. That's a good insight there. It's excellent. So in chapter 22, we have a few of the things. We're not supposed to keep something that's collateral. overnight. That's an interesting thing, you know. For example, let's just say that you know, you wanted to borrow somebody's cars, and then someone said, well, okay, well, give this to me. You know, in the meantime, let's make sure you bring it back and everything. Of course, most people who are friends don't usually do that, but you know, in some cases, for example, you may want to take someone's driver's license just to make sure that they, you know, come back with something, you know. And especially if, you know, they're your neighbor, seems to be the context here. You don't want to make sure to get that back to them before sundown. Of course, the context here is a coat, but you could extend that to various other things that you might take as collateral. But it looks like when it comes to basic needs of an individual, we want to make sure those are met, you know, not removed from somebody. I think that there's like another mitzvah regarding a millstone on a similar point that dealing with collateral. Let's see here, what is that? Because basically the idea was that that's his livelihood. Those are things that you want to make sure that they're not deprived of. Yeah, it's I think it's Devarim in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 6. So it's a similar. I think it's a similar thing and concept. It says in chapter 24, verse 6, no one may take a mill or even an upper millstone as collateral for a loan. So it's dealing with the issue of collateral. And it says because that would be taking as collateral the debtor's very means of sustenance. So I think it's a similar thing of the code. Don't take things as collateral and keep them overnight, things that are like essential to somebody. You know, make sure, go out of your way to make sure they get those things back right away.
So it's probably not a very good. Yeah,
There could be, I'm sure there could be other examples. These are specific ones given by the Torah.
I was
But
just thinking of my tools.
yeah, if someone took it as collateral, yeah, that would be something that would be essential to you.
That was my livelihood, and it was taken as collateral and gone.
Yes, that would be a violation of the mitzvah, yes. And that would not be good. And of course, God puts extra emphasis on this. If you do this, and they're distressed by it, they cry out to Him, God's going to be upset with you, and He's going to judge you. Verse 28, it's interesting. It says, "You are not to curse God, and you are not to curse a leader of your people." And of course, this is a mitzvah that is an important one, and the first part of it could possibly have a double meaning, or maybe even another meaning than how at least this particular version is stating it. The context of the second part of it obviously is cursing a leader of your people. The first part says you are not to curse God. Now the Hebrew word for God is what? What was that again? It's Elohim. Yeah, Elohim. Eloah, El could be also variants of God as well, but Elohim is often what it is. And so you're not to curse Elohim. Let's see, let me just double check. I know that's what the Hebrew word is. I'm just going to see how it's read here in the Hebrew. Exactly. Okay. Yeah, so it says Elohim lo tekalel. So that Hebrew word Elohim can have different contexts depending on what's being spoken of. Elohim can mean God, right? The God of Israel. Elohim can refer to false gods, of course, as well. But it can also refer to judges specifically. It can refer to judges. And I'll go to the passage in another place in the Torah where that makes that clear. I think it was actually in last week's Parsha. But anyways, last week's portion of Mishpatim. But that seems to be the context because of the second part of it. And so it could be understood that you were not to curse. It does say Elohim, but you were not to curse, like we translated judges, and you were not to curse a leader of your people. Let's see here.
So don't talk bad about Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, that's another thing we can discuss here.
Or Barack Obama, he's still our president.
Yeah. Let's see here. I'll see if I can find the portion which I was thinking of here. Like I said, I think it was in the first part of Parashat Mishpatim. Let's see. Maybe it's chapter 21 here, the chapter before it.
I was reading recently, while you're looking for that, I was reading recently something about some character in the Bible named Holy Bama. I've been praying for a Holy Bama for a while now. Been hoping that our Bama would be holy. Sorry, just a little side note.
That's okay. See if I can find that here.
We've been praying for a Holy Bama.
Anyways, I'll find that here shortly. Yeah. It does just, maybe it is in the Psalms. Like, I think it's Psalms chapter 82 here. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so we have, in verse, it's telling in Psalm chapter 82 where we have this usage, and it seems the context is fairly clear. And this can give meaning to something that Yeshua cites when he's talking to some of these people of Israel. But it says, a psalm of Asaph, Elohim, God, stands in the divine assembly. There, with Elohim, he judges. How long will you go on judging unfairly, favoring the wicked? So it's interesting. It's this interesting kind of play here on words here.
In this Bible here, it said Elohim. It said Elohim, God. Elohim means gods and judges. Yeshua used all three meanings in this wordplay in John 10:33-36.
Yeah, that's the passage I was thinking of, Yeshua.
Yeah.
But in the Hebrew, it's Mizmor le'asaf Elohim. So this is the first Elohim is speaking about the God of Israel, and then it says Nitzav ba'adat El bekerv Elohim yishpot. And so the second Elohim is not the God of Israel. So it's interesting. It shows the different usages right there in this verse. So the idea, and then of course the context, it uses the word for judging.
My God.
And then in verse 2 it says, how long will you go on judging unfairly? So here's a place where it uses the word Elohim when it means judges. So this is one passage where it shows that. So again, as we're getting into our particular portion. Oh yeah, go ahead. Okay, so back to chapter 22 of Shemot, verse 28, the book of Exodus, when it says you are not to curse God, and you are not to curse a leader of your people. Now, does this make sense of this translation of God, Elohim, could be judges. It fits the context of dealing with leaders, right? Because you could have judges, then you can actually have leaders. So it's handling two groups of people that have oversight over the people of Israel. It says you are not to curse them. And of course, this is an important one. We see Shaul citing this passage when he gets into it with the Parashim and the Zedukim, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. We see that, he's being questioned and he's answering in a way they don't like, and someone strikes him. I think it was the servant of the high priest or something of that nature strikes him. And he sees that this happens and who had him do that. And he calls him a whitewashed tomb, right? And he basically breathes a threat. Let's see here. Let's see if we can find that passage here so we can look exactly what it is. Trying to find the exact. Where is that passage? You guys, maybe I can find that maybe before I can.
What are you looking for? Sorry. I was reading something else.
Okay, there it is. I found it. So it's the Sefer Maasim, the book of Acts, in chapter 23, verse 2. Shaul looked straight at them and said, "Brothers, I have been discharging my obligations to God with a perfectly clear conscience right up until today. But the Kohen Hagadol, the high priest, Hananiah, ordered those standing near him to strike him on the mouth. And then Shaul said to him, 'God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. Will you sit there judging me according to the Torah, yet in violation of the Torah order me to be struck?'" Now, he doesn't say, "May a curse come upon you," but he does say, basically, God will strike you, So I guess in a way it was kind of you could see that as being a curse. So, in response to this, in verse 4, the men nearby said, "This is the Kohen Hagadol of God that you are insulting." So it's just basically, even could be considered an insult. So verse 5 says, Shaul said, "I didn't know, brothers, that he was the Kohen Hagadol. For it says in the Torah, you are not to speak disparagingly of a ruler of your people." So that's how he interpreted this mitzvah. It's dealing with a word. It could mean curse, but obviously in Shaul's, Paul, in his scholarship, he understood it to even mean speaking disparagingly of a ruler of your people, even though that ruler was doing something obviously evil. So if this is the case, we have to be very careful, right? Because Shaul was sensitive to this. And he's even been, most people that will speak wicked about rulers in our country, they're not getting even hit in the face, and they're already doing things like this. And so we have to be sensitive to this. Now, it doesn't mean we have to accept what they're doing. We can certainly pray for them, but we can stand against the issues, right? Because there's a difference between standing against an issue and coming against a person personally.
Right.
And insulting them and saying disparaging
So
remarks.
he repented of that immediately.
Immediately, yeah. And that's the example we have, not only from the Torah, but from Yeshua's disciple. And so, in our country, this kind of gets out of control when it comes to the presidential elections or those who are in leadership. I'm sure I've been guilty of it as well, but we all have to be very careful. I've seen it, amongst the Messianic community, amongst the Christian community, and it's a mitzvah that has to be kept. It's an important one. So that's an interesting thing there. And then, of course, it's also referring to the judges. So it just wouldn't be a leader of the people. It would be someone who is a magistrate. You're supposed to have that respect for.
That's my thing. Really, it's a good thing here, God say, you are not to curse the leader of the people. This, I'm going to have to deal with this really, because I really need to I already got on my knees and asked Hashem to forgive me. It's just a lot of things that are happening, and because of the struggle,
Mm-hmm.
And so I really need to watch.
Yeah, we all do. We all do. And of course, like, amongst a lot of the different Messianic communities
Oh, yes.
that I've talked to leaders, in Messianic communities, in all around the United States, around the world, and a lot of times, individuals within the Messianic community can treat their congregational leaders pretty horribly,
Yes, I noticed
and
that.
say all kinds of manner of nasty things about them, and it's a Torah violation.
A lot of it's false report.
Well, yeah, and the Torah has separate stuff to say about that, but
Well, it says
you know,
in chapter 23, verse 1, you
Yeah.
not to repeat false
Yeah.
rumors.
yeah. So it's not only that, because some people will say, well, and I've heard this literally, people say this, well, as long as it's true, it's okay, because they'll say it's false rumors,
Yeah.
And of course,
So if they're true rumors,
well, the
There's
Torah
such a
also
thing.
says not to go around being a talebearer amongst your people. It doesn't matter if it's true or false.
doesn't the word rumor kind of indicate that you don't have facts?
Yeah,
It's just something you're spreading around.
but the fact is that
It's not established by
the
two or
Messianic
three
community
witnesses.
is not to speak, disparagingly of their leaders, and it's a Torah violation. There's a mitzvah that Shaul gives to the Messianic community in regards to that, because it's really important because it affects the integrity of the entire community. Once the enemy is allowed to come in and attack the leaders,
Right.
then the sheep scatter. It's like the scripture says, and that's exactly what happens. We've seen it happen many times. But Shaul talks about this, and let's see if I can find that here. He gives us instruction specifically for the Messianic community in regards to this. It's kind of as a safeguard. Okay, so okay, so it's 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 19. And I think it's along the lines of the spirit of the mitzvah that we're reading. So 1 Timothy 5, maybe if somebody has that, then maybe they can read that.
13?
5 verse 9. It's giving us instruction regarding elders and leaders within the community, and that instruction begins basically in verse 17. But the verses in particular is in verse 19.
So we'll start 17.
You can just read verse 19.
Never listen to any accusation against the leader unless it is supported by 2 or 3 witnesses.
So let's say someone comes up and says, "Oh, you know what, Rabbi so and so, oh, he did this." It's like, "Oh, really? Did somebody else see that too? Like firsthand?" Because there's a difference between that and hearing it, right? Actual witness, because you can have a lot of different people that have been, talking and spreading lashon hara and evil
Yeah.
speech,
Usually-
and they all hear the same thing, so it must be true, but there's no actual witnesses
And
to
then
it.
usually you hear that and you're like, so did you see this happen yourself? Well, no, I heard it from so-and-so. Did they see it themselves?
No, they heard it from so and so.
No, I heard it, and you're like, okay, well, I'm not.
They all must be
can't
saying
hear
it, so it
what
must be true. So, anyways,
I usually just say that's Lashon Hara, I can't hear it.
well, yeah, and so but it goes back to speaking disparagingly about the leader. Verse 19 says, unless there's 2 or 3 actual witnesses, you're not even supposed to listen to it. You're supposed to stop them in their tracks and listen. That's not right,
We
but-
really shouldn't be speaking disparagingly about any of our brothers, especially the leaders.
Yeah, but if there are 2 or 3 actual witnesses that actually witnessed an actual Torah sin, then of course the leader should be reproved. If it's a verified Torah sin and it's just not something like, well, I didn't like when they told me I couldn't do something, or when they called me on my sin. I didn't like that they've wrinkled their eyebrows when they talked to me, and,
Oh, come
you
on.
know,
Come on,
you didn't do it
Rick.
right. I didn't like how you did it, so you're the bad guy now. Even though
Nobody ever says anything like that, very well.
you deepened your voice too much, I didn't like that. You know, I mean, seriously, it's just, that's the type of stuff I get all the time. And so, but the point being is that if someone actually does, let's just say that, you know, God forbid, you know, a leader stole something from you, or struck you, or they did something that was actually, you know, or God forbid, you know, hurt, you know, somebody in your family.
Or they
know.
taught something clearly against Torah in the front of the congregation. I mean, that would obviously that would be one of those situations
or
where
they taught something that was clearly against the Torah. You know, there's lots of different examples. If you actually had 2 or 3 witnesses that witnessed it, then you're supposed to take them to task, and there's supposed to be accountability there. In that case, in verse 20, it says, "Rebuke before the whole assembly those leaders who continue sinning, as a warning to others." So, you know, that should take place. But Yeshua and Torah and Shaul has a system about how that's supposed to happen, and when we don't respect that, the community suffers. And the Messianic community has had a hard time learning those lessons.
Why is it that it's, you know, I noticed that, because I've visited quite a few, you know, Messianic places, especially here in the Northwest, and it seems like everybody is against the other. You know, one rabbi say one thing, the other rabbi say another.
It's rebellion.
And I see Lord, I go, my God, you know, I was telling my wife the other day, you know, I said, have you noticed something about our rabbi? And she goes, now listen what every, you know, and I said, have you noticed something about our rabbis? You know, that man humbled himself. He was got a lot of money. But you go to other places, and everybody seems like everybody just against everybody else. You know, I don't understand that.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things we can unify ourselves on, and I don't see why people have to feel like they have to separate themselves and do all that. But, you know, my prayer is that God's people would draw closer to Him, first and foremost. And as we do that, as we draw closer to His truths, and false doctrines are removed from the people because we're being exposed by God's light, as we move closer to God, that means that if we're all doing that, we're also going to be, you know, moving closer to each other.
I heard a good quote from a pastor one time years ago. He said that the body of Messiah is the only army in the world that stands in a circle with all their guns pointed inward.
Well, I think that's because of our country. You know how our country is used to attacking its leaders. It's just kind of ingrained, I think, in a lot of people that if you're a leader, you're a target now. Some people don't even understand it. They just feel like, this is the person to criticize, this is the person to attack. And a lot of people get this idea that, you know, if there's some type of leadership or some type of, you know, oversight, if someone has authority, it's time to storm the gates. It doesn't matter who they are, you know, we're going to find something and we're going to storm the gates.
Unfortunately, due to the founding of this nation and the way it was founded and the Civil War, this country has romanticized rebels.
Yeah.
And that has become a major part of our culture. And because it's become a major part of our culture, it's exalted rather than what it really is, which is witchcraft.
Yeah. Well, look what's happened with even the elections. You know, we have these elections, you know, Donald Trump won square and fair, and people are, you know, out protesting and they're doing all these things, you know, and it's just, but that's what they were raised with. That's what they're ingrained in their minds and their hearts is to rebel.
I think it's entrenched in our culture, and I think it does have a lot to do with how our country was founded, which was really a big rebellion.
Yeah.
So, not saying it wasn't justified, but it was a rebellion, and they romanticized that, and it's just not a good part of culture.
Yeah. A large part of this portion, it deals with first fruit offerings. And so we see a lot of that. There's some miscellaneous mitzvot that are woven in between, I think with God's purposes. But, you know, for example, we have in verse 29 of chapter 22, you're not to delay offering from your harvest, the grain, olive oil, and wine. Firstborn of your sons you are to give to me. Of course, they were to redeem them. There's a redemption price. But they were to be dedicated to Hashem. And then you have, the same thing in verse 30. You do the same thing with your oxen and your sheep. It is to stay with his mother 7 days, and on the 8th day you are to give it to me. And of course, we have this mitzvah about the verse 31. We're, as a holy people, there's a number of different things that God expects from us. And of course, that involves keeping all of his mitzvot. But a similar thing that we see in verse 31 is what we see in Leviticus 11 regarding the kosher standards, in regards to what would be considered fit to eat and what would be considered clean or unclean. And so it's set up in the same way as the statement that we see here, because in the beginning and the end of Leviticus 11, it says, "You shall be a holy people unto me," right? You should be, and this is where the passage where we find, "You shall be holy, for I am holy." And the context is eating clean animals as opposed to the unclean. And so this is a similar thing that he says in verse 31. Here, you're my specially separated people, holy people. Therefore, you're not to eat any flesh torn by wild animals in the countryside, rather throw it out with dogs. So, people can come up with all kinds of different reasons of why we would want to eat a kosher diet, or eat things that are not considered common, like something that's sweet and rich, even if it would otherwise be kosher, with my dogs. The biggest reason for that is to be holy. That we can think of, well, it's healthy for us, clean animals have these certain characteristics, so on and so forth, and that's fine, that's good. It is healthy to keep the Torah, but
that's
the main reason God himself is because you're supposed to be holy. That's all the reason we eat.
I'll tell you, at my work, not eating pork really makes you holy.
Set apart, right?
You really are set apart, and you feel it when you're there. Just the constant comment being made, and there's this constant buzz going on. Oh, well, he doesn't eat pork, and you can tell that people view me as very different. People that don't consume pork or unkosher things like some of the Thai food that comes, it's got shellfish in it and things like that, and I can't. They just don't eat it, and they think it's strange. They don't know why I do it, but and it definitely sets me apart.
Right. And you have an opportunity to share the scriptures and the word and your God with people. Right. Well, let's get into chapter 23. You guys have any thoughts on the mitzvah for reading chapter 23?
Sorry. This chapter, you are not to delay offerings from your harvest of grain, olive oil, and wine. This really beat in my heart. And in fact, I had a dream about this. The Lord kind of showed me a dream, and I made a promise to when you make a promise to Hashem, you better do it, because otherwise, you don't swear, in vain to Hashem.
Right.
But I told my wife last night, I said, this has been bothering me, I know we've been short of money, we've short of everybody, blah, blah. But I said, you know what? We haven't given to Hashem. And I made a promise to Hashem, I said, Hashem, on the first of the year, I don't care if I'm broke, I don't care if I have nothing, no gas. I said, I'm going to start giving to you. And what the Lord, Yeshua showed me is, he said, don't worry about it. Don't you have a place to sleep? I go, yes. Don't you have a home? Yes. Don't you have food? Yes. So, what else do you want more? I said, look at the lilies, how they are. Look at the grass.
Right.
I mean, and this really been bothering me. It's been in my heart. And, and I tell the Lord, God, I've been forgetting. You have blessed me, and I've let you down. And we need to really, I don't care what, we need to give to the Almighty. We have to. We need to keep, and the more we give, the doors of heaven will be open and more rain come to us.
Yeah, it's one of the ways it's one of the mitzvahs he gives us to cause us to trust him more, to rely on him more, and less on things we have. That's something for everyone.
Because the Lord did, I forgot where it's in Malachi, what he said, you robbed me.
Right.
That's what he said. You stole from me. And I go, yes, I have. this right here.
Well, pick it up in the Torah. Jesus and pass it down.
That's really neat, open.
What do you guys think about 23? Chapter 23. Give just a little bit of time.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. On chapter 23, but I wanted to give the individual a chance to.
Chapter 23, verse 4. If you come upon you with ox or donkey string, you must return it to him. If you see a donkey which belongs to someone who hates you, lying down, hook up his clothes. Do not pass him by or go out and free it. So if you is the same, treat others the way you want to be treated, because that is your donkey. To the stranger. If you need help, you want somebody to help you. So
Yeah.
If you find somebody's ripstick across the street and you're like, oh, I know this belongs to so-and-so, take it back to him.
Yeah, there could be other applications, to this.
also at the bottom of verse 23.
Well, before we get there, I want to comment about a little bit more on that one. I'm glad you brought that one up. Because it mentions even your enemies. Because a lot of times, well, if we have an enemy, we often don't want anything to do with our enemy. We don't like the person, we think they're bad. Anyway.
But you bring their donkey back to him, that's going to say a lot.
So the Torah, Hashem has his Torah is all about love and making amends between enemies. And this mitzvah is designed, I believe, for that purpose. That if you see if your enemy needs that help with donkey or whatever it is that has been lost, and you just help them take care of that. This is going to be a great opportunity. I see this mitzvah as a great opportunity to turn an enemy into a friend. That's one way I can look at it. So you have another.
Yes, bottom of chapter 23, verse 25. You are to serve out now your God. He will bless your food and water. He will take sickness away from among you, your land, your woman. Not be scared, be barren. You live the full span of your lives. So do what God asks you to do. You will be healthy. You have food. You have water, and your woman will be barren.
Exactly. That's another great point because earlier we were talking about eating a kosher diet, and I had mentioned that the main reason that God gives us to do that is to be holy as He is holy, to be especially for our people. And so that's the first and foremost thing. But as I mentioned, it's helped you keep the Torah, and that's just not my own opinion. This is actually, like we mentioned, literally what the Torah says. When we keep His mitzvah, He's going to bless our food and water. He's going to take our sickness away, and our women aren't going to miss it, and we're going to live a long life. So, I mean, if you want to live a nice, happy, and long, healthy life,
Follow the Torah. Well, when Moshe said choose life or choose death, he wasn't joking around.
yes. Right? Yeah.
He literally meant choose life,
Yeah.
real life.
The Torah really does help us.
And not just eternal life, but also life now, right here.
Exactly. In the beginning of the chapter, it says, we talked about this a little bit, don't repeat false rumors, don't join the wicked when by offering perjured testimony, don't follow the crowd, don't allow popular view to sway you in offering testimony for any cause if the effect is for justice. So obviously if there's somebody that is engaging in wickedness and they want you to be a witness for them, and it doesn't matter if you somehow are a friend that they're engaging in wickedness, and you know that's the cause, then you're not supposed to have anything to do with this torment stuff. For example, if you have somebody that for whatever reason you're in contact with that is an anti-missionary and they want to go drag a Messianic Jewish leader in congregation to court, you might want to think about not telling them to do that. Right? Just a suggestion. But the Torah would consider that a violation of the mitzvah, seeking for justice. When you know that what the actual cause is, and you know what they're really trying to do, and they're just trying to attack and to destroy us in the future.
I can't imagine that would happen.
No. But, of course, as we look at this passage too,
be a lemming, just don't fall off the cliff.
The main guide is the Torah. We always want to follow God.
Right.
You know, and if people happen to be walking along with God, great. Go with the majority. If they're not, don't do it according to the Torah. So there's a few other myths, folks, that we could discuss here. We're running out of time. Any other particular passages that someone just wants to quickly talk about before we conclude this portion of the study? I like to point out in verse 12, when it comes to Shabbat, it says, "For 6 days you are to work, but on the seventh day you are to rest, so that your ox and donkey can rest, and your slave girl's son and a foreigner be renewed." So in other words, the Shabbat is just not a Jewish identifier. It mentions the foreigner, and it even mentions the animals. And so I like to bring this up. You know, some people will say, well, Shabbat's not really for me, it's not Jewish.
For human beings and animals.
Well, yeah, Yeshua says for mankind, but, you know, if someone says the Shabbat's not for you, you're not Jewish, but it is for my dog, hey, are you not more important than a dog? What does Yeshua say? Are you not more important than one of these sparrows?
Yeah.
Yes, it's for you. If it's for your dog, it's for you. Come on. This is basic Torah stuff.
They're just trying to keep the Gentiles out because they're afraid of what Gentiles are going to do to their faith and to their culture. They see it as a washing down.
Well, and I can understand that. You know, if a lot of the nations come in, they don't respect, you know, the
I can understand that too,
and the Torah
but to take somebody who's earnestly
and
wanting to
healthy
live a life.
tradition that's not against the Torah and wants to, like, you know, cause all kinds of chaos. I understand.
But the problem is, to some degree, that is happening in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. But the reality is
You can't ban the
you can't ban the Shabbat from people because you're worried about
it.
their culture.
No, you have to deal with it in more other ways. One other thing I wanted to touch on before we move on here to our other study is verse 13. It says, "Pay attention to everything I have said to you. Do not invoke the names of other gods, or even let them be heard crossing your lips." Of course, the context is, follow me, not other gods.
Right.
But another aspect of this is not to even speak of other gods, or let them be heard crossing your lips. Now, obviously the context is in which, in a way in such that it would be in adoration, in a way that would be in
Speak
servitude,
positively.
in a way that would be in worship. Because obviously, I mean, some people take this too far.
Right.
Oh,
I'm not.
we
I'm not
can't
gonna
say a certain day
what
of the
they
week
do.
because that might be, you know, that might have some other, you know, false, you know, name of God associated with it. You know, we can't say
I'm
anything.
just gonna say day 1, day 2, day 3 now.
Well, yeah, but that's not what it's saying. It's talking about the context of, like I mentioned, worship, obeying, things of that nature. Now, I make this very clear as people have this issue because if you read through the Bible,
How many times are false gods?
there are many names of false gods in the Bible.
Yeah.
If you take that line of thinking that some of these people take,
You wouldn't be able to read the
you
Bible.
can't read the Bible either. You just can't because this is, you know, obviously that's not what it's saying.
He clearly would not be in violation of the Torah if he said, "So I was out looking through my telescope and I pointed it at Saturn."
Yeah,
It's not gonna be a
you're not
violation of
saying
the
in the
Torah.
context of
talking about
obeying
planet.
a god or worshiping God. Now, here's another thing to think about. You know, when it comes to dogmas and second-name theology, you know, people want to think that they know the person is God. If you take the tetragrammaton, you take the 4 letters, the Yud, He, Vav, He, you take a look at that, those
That's,
It's not gonna feel very loved and
That's-
respected.
that's what I like when we,
But that's what these sacred neighbors do.
Or even
Yeah.
worse, what if Bernie's standing next to him and you're trying to talk to Brian?
that's,
Yeah.
And you say
That's-
Bernie, Brian's not gonna, he's gonna be like, oh.
that's what I like when Moshe asked him, well, who can I tell him who you are? He said, I am who I am. And I go, that's it.
So, and my point of bringing this up is in verse 13, where it says, do not invoke the names of other gods. If you don't know for a fact what the name of God is, and it could be 30 other things at least,
And you're worshiping.
and you're using that name in the context of worship
Ooh,
and adoration,
and it's the
and
name
it could be the name of another false god, and you just didn't know, you were just being careless, then that is a major violation of the mitzvah of the Torah. So it's actually,
it becomes idol worship.
it's not just a traditional thing that we avoid doing.
They thought about it.
It's an actual Torah violation. That's the reason why we don't do it, because of what the Torah says.
It's kind of like not sacrificing animals, not having a temple in place. Similar line of thinking.
That's what
It would
people,
be a violation of Torah to try and keep a particular Torah mitzvah if the conditions are correct.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
that's what people ask me. I said, well, what God do you people pray to? I said, Hashem, Yeshua.
Or Abba.
What do you mean by that? Is it same? I said, no. I said, it's a lot of difference right there, buddy.
I said it God of Abraham,
I
right?
said, yeah.
And one of the
That
things,
makes it pretty clear.
one extra thing before we close, I was talking about this last portion in chapter 23. Actually, towards the end of chapter 22, it's dealing with first fruits. And there's a lot of mitzvot dealing with first fruits. We see that starting after talking about the Feast of Matzah in verse 16. Talks about the festival of first fruits, the first fruits of your efforts sowing in the field, festival of ingathering. It speaks of the sacrifices in verse 19. It then says, this is context, this is why I bring this up. Verse 19, it says, you are to bring the best first fruits of your land into the house of Hashem your God. So it's talking about first fruits. And in the same verse, the second part of that verse 19, after it says you should bring the best first fruits of your land into your house, Hashem your God, what does it say? It says you are not to boil your young animal in its mother's milk.
Right.
Context. What is that talking about? It's not talking about separating meat and milk. The context is first fruits. If we read the scriptures responsibly, that is what the Bible is talking about. First fruits. By the way, the other two places you find in the Torah, guess what the surrounding context is?
First fruits.
First fruits. Every single time the context is first fruits. So I've read a book on this issue by actually a traditional Jew. He's breaking with the tradition, and he even mentions things like very popular for saying this. In his study, and it was dealing with the Peshatz, the literal level of the very strange understanding, it says he's talking about immediate context, he's talking about broad context, he's talking about looking into the language. And he determined from his study, from his scholarship, that the word boil can refer to mature or ripen as well. The context is you're not to mature, or you're not to allow a young animal that's supposed to be offered as a first fruit offering. You're not supposed to let it grow old on its mother's milk. You're not supposed to let it sit there, and it's supposed to be offered
Right.
as a first one.
So don't let it get weaned before you offer it. You're supposed to offer it when it's time to offer it, not when it's weaned from its mother.
Right, you're not supposed to hang on to it. You're supposed to offer it as a first thing.
I'll let that go as soon as it gets tough.
Yeah, so that's the context. It's straightforward,
Yeah.
and if you find those in the other two places, it's first fruits.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the turkey on rye with Swiss.
No, well, even if you didn't have that context, I mean, you boil it down to you're not to boil a young animal on its milk.
Right.
And as long as you're not taking a mother's offspring and boiling it in its milk, its own milk,
Right.
you haven't divided the mitzvah. But the point is first fruits.
Well, and you'd be hard pressed to boil a turkey that's mother's milk,
Yeah.
since turkeys don't.
Yeah.
Same with chicken.
They're not
Just the
gonna
chicken and then it's egg.
Yeah.
Boiled egg yolk.
Yeah. There are some that have said, well, this has to do with pagan practices. They would do this and sprinkle the milk. Modern scholarship has proved that completely wrong. That's not something
very, very clearly
Can be
about the
substantiated.
first fruits offering.
Yeah, the context is
Raising
sort
them on the time that they're meant to be brought.
Yep, that's what it is. So anyways, we're a little bit over, so why don't we just take about a minute here and we'll transition to our Brit Chadashah study. We're getting into Romans chapter 13, so fun stuff to read and to talk about. So let's take a quick breather and bless Hashem for that study. And we'll get into it. We're only about 40 minutes left here.
Romans chapter 13.
Romans chapter 13 of Brit Chadashah study, our study of the Chadashah theme, the Acts of Abraham. Oh yeah.
Oh, Rabbi. Mom, I ask you if you can check out the money right now. Right now. If you can order her this, what she want with the leather, and she says she'll put it down and Saturday, give you a credit card, and you can order the whole one right away. Yeah. And on the next Wednesday, I'll be down here, and I'll take care of you, because I'll be free, because I need to give you that back. I took people money.
Alright guys, we're gonna bless and get right into it here.
Cool.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gives the Torah and the good news of salvation to his people Israel and to all the peoples through his Son, Yeshua the Messiah, our Lord. Amen. Amen. Father, I pray that you would just give us insight and wisdom to come and hide the words, Father, the emissary and the disciple of our Master Yeshua, Father, in our hearts. Learn more about it. We just thank you, Father, in Yeshua's name. Amen. All right, guys, so we'll begin for our Chadashah study, our new covenant study out of the writings. Right? We are in Romans chapter 13. And all is for our reading. This is the short 14 verses here. Verse 1, everyone is to obey the governing authorities, for there is no authority that is not from God, and the existing authorities have been placed where they are by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities is resisting what God has instituted, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but bad. Would you like to be unafraid of the person in authority? Simply do what is good, and you will win his approval. For he is God's servant, therefore there for your benefit. But if you do what is wrong, be afraid, because it is not for nothing that he holds the power of the sword, for he is God's servant. There is an avenger to punish wrongdoers. Another reason to obey, besides fear of punishment, is for the sake of conscience.
This is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's public officials, consisting of constantly attending to these duties. Pay everyone what he is owed. If you owe the tax collector, pay your taxes. If you owe the revenue collector, pay revenue. If you owe someone respect, pay him respect. If you owe someone honor, pay him honor. Don't owe anyone anything except to love one another. For whoever loves his fellow human being is being fulfilled, it has fulfilled Torah. For the commandments, do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not covet, and any others are summed up in this one rule: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does not do harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fullness of Torah.
besides all this, you know at what point of history we stand. So it is a high time for you to rouse yourselves from sleep. From the final deliverance is nearer than when we first came to trust. The night is almost over. The day is almost here. So let us put aside the deeds of darkness and arm ourselves with the weapons of light. Let us live properly as people do in the daytime, not partying and getting drunk, not engaging in sexual immorality and other excesses, not quarreling and being jealous. Instead, clothe yourselves with the Lord Yeshua the Messiah, and don't waste your time thinking about how to provide for the sinful desires of your old nature.
Wow.
That's good.
Really good.
So we have the first,
Thank you.
we have the first verse there,
Uh-huh.
and it's talking about something that we were discussing earlier in the Torah. When it says, "You shall not curse," or the way that Shaul interpreted it, "You shall not speak disparagingly about the ruler of the people," whether it's the judges or whether it's another type of ruler.
up all that
Work
mess
it-
around
work
your
it.
house, you go clean it up. I mean,
you know, you'd want to work with that. So, and this is part of the health of the Messianic community, and part of what the scriptures tell us. So this is, there are different definitions of Torah. And the first 5 books of the Bible, which contain the foundation mitzvot and the covenants of the Torah. But Torah is God's instruction. So we believe that this has been given by the Spirit of God through a prophet, through an emissary, of God. And so it would also be included in the Torah. The instructions that we're expected to observe. But some people don't look at that and they just think it is optional stuff. Like, oh yeah, it's nice to read that, Jewish Shaul.
the thing I was bringing up before, from a historical perspective, the Magna Carta was established by a war party that had attacked their local king, where their king was in charge, I believe it was in England, and basically had that king sign away his power as the king, with the clear wording that the established authority is not put in place by God, but is put in place by the approval of people. And so the Magna Carta effectively violates the scripture by stating that it's the people who rule and not the ruler.
Sure. Well, it would be
Unfortunately, America has followed suit in that same way of thinking.
yeah.
Not that we aren't in a good situation and that we haven't been blessed and that we haven't been, following God as a nation, but in this particular area, I believe that not only has England, but many of the established countries in this world, following suit of the Magna Carta, have violated this very scripture.
But it doesn't change the scripture at all.
No, I don't think it does. No.
Just because someone declares something doesn't mean that God.
No, I agree with you on
No,
that.
no longer with that.
But I think to make the declaration in a government paper and force a king to sign it on with the result being death if he did not, that states exactly contrary to what the scripture states. I think that's a huge violation.
Yeah, that's one other issue. But even if someone takes that position, that gets the scripture applied even.
Yeah.
The illustration. So,
Well, I think God can sway the vote and that establishes, whatever leader.
yeah.
And we need to respect that leader. But I think people don't, I think because people have this mentality that, oh, well, we're in charge, we're the people, we are the ones who decide, not God. Because that's been established, it has caused us a lot of problems.
No, I agree. Yes. Anything else from chapter 13 that interests you?
I think it really put me in my place when, or God put me in my place when I read the last verse. It's that, actually the last couple verses. Let us live properly as people do in the daytime, not partying and getting drunk, not engaging in sexual immorality or other excesses, not quarreling and being jealous. Instead, clothe yourselves with the Lord Yeshua the Messiah, and don't waste your time thinking about how to provide for the simple desires of your own nature. And it's one of the hardest things I'm struggling with right now is thinking about what I can do to entertain myself.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on the relationship with Hashem.
Yeah, obviously that should be the majority of our time.
Yeah, it should
It's
be.
not that you can't have time to enjoy yourself,
Yeah.
but we make that our life's purpose. I think that seems to be the context.
Kind of the definition of hedonism.
It's referring to how we live, right? That's the properly, right? And so obviously, partying is it's not like simply having a simcha, like a celebration, but these are like
serve ourselves and worship ourselves.
This is other excesses.
Yeah.
So the context, I think part of it is that, we find ourselves doing this all the time. You know, like I said, now and then we get together and have a drink with brothers, is one thing, as long as we're not being drunk, of course. Or to, having a good time to time. Like, for example, we have a game night. It's every 2 weeks. For sure, not time.
It's not every day.
Right.
All day.
But if we found ourselves doing that every single day, then we'd be like, okay, guys.
Yeah.
We need to do something a little different.
Need something there?
I was just gonna say, you create it and make it almost like an idol. You're,
Right.
yeah.
Becomes the purpose of your life, it's a problem.
Exactly. So, he's saying that the night is almost over, and we need to put aside the deeds of darkness and begin to train ourselves for this spiritual war and attain these weapons of life. And obviously, if we're engaged in all these other things he's talking about in verse 13, we're never going to have the time for training.
Right.
And it's a real type of training. It's a real, in a sense, it's a real martial art. It's a real spiritual kung fu.
It's a real thing.
Because, if you think about it, kung fu means like hard work, right? So, it's a spiritual discipline, to be engaged in the Word, to be gaining the tools to be able to understand it, to be able to spend time in prayer and worship and fellowship and building each other up. And, those are real spiritual exercises, and they really are a type of fight stuff.
I like in
In the
verse
spiritual realm.
I like what he's saying though in verse 14. You see a contrast here. The second part of it being wasting your time thinking about how to provide for the sinful desires of your old nature. So who you were before you met inside Yeshua. Now the contrast to that is clothing yourself in the Lord Yeshua the Messiah. So instead of spending all your time thinking about how to provide for the sinful desires, spend all your time thinking about how can I be more like Yeshua. And it just keeps pointing back to the idea of keep your eyes on Yeshua. Are you looking at Yeshua on a daily basis in everything that you do and all that you say? Is your mind meditated on Yeshua?
Yeah.
Are you trying to be like him?
Right. And like I said, there's a place for time for us to enjoy ourselves and have time.
Right.
The main thing is that we shouldn't spend our week thinking, okay, how can I rearrange my week so I can go out and get stuff and drink alcohol and maybe go watch a movie. That's not how we should spend our week trying to figure out how we can. How we should spend our week is, Josh, I wonder how I can rearrange my week to get together with the other brothers in the synagogue and just study the scriptures with them and hear their insights and be built up. That's what we should spend our time. And if we happen to have time after we've done that, right, because we should also see things first, then yeah, there might be some room for some other things.
Right.
But it's priorities. I think that's part of what it's talking about is that in life, we have to have priorities. We have to figure out who am I going to serve? What am I going to do? And if it's the Lord, let's establish right now on myself and my house, we're going to serve the Lord.
We should be thinking throughout the week.
It's Yeshua taught a marshal on this. When it came to establishing how are you going to tackle a project, right? Do you remember the marshal that he teaches about that, the parable? He teaches 2 of them. One of them is dealing with building a building, and one of them is war, right?
You planned out the man that does plan before he builds. He looks like a fool. He does not complete it. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's in Luke chapter 14. I think it's spoken of in a few places around the scriptures. But Yeshua talks about this. This is an important spiritual lesson for us all to learn.
Spend your whole bank account on the foundation. Whatever you got.
So we have, verse 28. Keep in mind the context is the previous context is verse 27. It's like we have to make sacrifices in life, to serve God. In verse 27, Yeshua says, whoever does not carry his own execution stake to come after me cannot be my talmid, cannot be my disciple. So to be a disciple of Yeshua takes sacrifice. It can't be a simple convenience thing. That's not, you can't be a disciple of Yeshua with
You know, on this verse 12, I'm sorry. On this verse 12, you know, it said the night is almost over, the day is almost here. You know, let us put aside power. And then on verse 13, it said, let us leave property as people in the daytime, you know, like getting drunk, blah, blah, blah. And if we look at Isaiah 61, number 1, he said here, the spirit of Adonai Elohim is upon me because Adonai has anointed me and to announce the good news to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted. And also he said to proclaim freedom to the captives, to let out into light those bound into dark. Woohoo!
Yeah.
There we go.
That's the God is reminding me when you get to that's the theme verse for the 2017 negotiating conference. Ruach Adonai Lai, the Spirit of Hashem is upon me, and Hashem can do some awesome things. But anything else, guys?
It's funny because when I was little, and I read when it says, when Yeshua says, so everyone, one of you who doesn't renounce all that he has cannot, or all that he has cannot be my Talmud. I thought it was like, well, if I can say that, oh yeah, I can just give up everything, and he can say like, okay, if you give all this stuff up, you can be with me. It's not really how it works. It's like,
I mean, there could be certain contexts where that would happen, but the real concept is that this, my kids, my house, everything, it's not mine.
right.
And if God wants me to use it for his purposes, if someone's in need or God has a particular mission in which he wants me to use that, everything I have has to be used for his purposes. I have to be willing to, I have to hold it in my hand like it's not mine, I'm just a steward of it. Otherwise, we cling to it like standard to love your neighbor as yourself? No. You have to have an objective standard because mankind is so perverse. And that standard is the Torah. And so you cannot define love your neighbor as yourself or do as others as you have to do unto you based on any other thing except for what the Torah says that is.
Well, and I think an area that a lot more mild area where people violate this is when we enable others. A lot of times we think we're loving somebody by giving them this and giving them that and giving them this and doing this and that for them, when what we're actually doing with them is enabling them. And a good example of that, I would believe, would be, like particularly here in Spokane, going up to a homeless person holding a sign and handing them $100. I think that's probably not loving because more than likely that person is on the street for a reason. And in a lot of cases, those people are on the street not just because of hard luck, but because they may have a particular addiction or they may be involved in things that they shouldn't be involved in. Now, if we were to take that same money, that $100, and take it down to the Gospel Mission or Catholic Charities or some organization that does what does right for these people, we would be loving them. And so, I think we have, although I would love it if somebody came up to me and gave me $100, I don't think that I would be loving a particular person by just handing them $100.
Well, you make a very good point. God's love is responsible. God's love is responsible. So, for example, if I agree that God's standard of holiness is love, because God, the Scripture says God is love. Right? So, if I agree that everything He does is love, that's the standard, the quantifiable standard of what love is. Even if it's something that's uncomfortable, but it's in accordance with God's love, I would want that to be done to me. So, for example, if I'm sinning and I'm going down a path and I don't have a lick of sense to turn around from that, I don't want my brother to get in my face, even if they have to wrinkle their forehead at me and deepen their voice. I want them to say, no, brother, that's bad.
Right.
I want them to do that to me. Because I know that that's what God says should be done, and that's God's standard of love. Even though that might be uncomfortable for me, I might say, you're not being loving.
Same goes with our children.
That's not true. That is loving. When I was a young child, and we grew up to be a teenager, my parents said no to me a lot. And I thought, how mean. When I become a parent, I'm never going to tell my children no. I'm going to always just give them everything they want. Because I don't like when my parents say I can't have something, or when they yell at me for being bad. I don't like that, so I'm never.
Ray, well, I'm sure glad
As you grow up and you get your own children, you realize how simple was that. Looking back at that, I am glad my parents told me no on numerous different occasions. I am glad. Looking back at that in God's wisdom, I would want that to be done to me.
I don't know how many times I told my mom, I'm glad you whipped my rear because I needed it. And it can be an uncomfortable thing. There's times when your kids need just a good whooping. And I'll tell you, it's not always comfortable to do. You don't always want to do something like that to your children.
Well, ideally,
You're causing them pain. But
that's few and far between.
I'm just saying, my point is there are times when that has to happen. And it's not a comfortable thing for a parent to whoop their kids, but sometimes they need it. And when they grow older, they learn to respect that.
Well, they might think that they're not doing
Mike.
that when they're getting whooped by God. I'm never going to take my children that they get children.
My
And more and more they realize that, especially when dealing with their younger brothers and sisters, they just wish they could spank them.
Oh, yeah.
Which means when they get children, they will be spanked.
my
I have to rein it
my
back.
one thing that I used to watch, my brother that had children, was that when he spanked the kids, I can see them. He spanked the kids, and then the kids were crying. Then he walked to them and he said, "Look, I love you, but I have to punish you, but I still love you."
Oh, yeah.
And those kids just, okay, they just like, wow. But he spanked them, but then he told, "Oh, look, you hurt me to spank me. I love you, but he said no."
If we didn't, we did love them.
And-
We would just let them go along down
and they just,
have they skip down the path of destruction and say, have fun.
but it's, even the Bible says it's not wrong to spank. You're not gonna hurt a kid like, their parents.
I mean, they get abused, but you know, I mean, spanking them, I mean,
You will hurt them severely, but not never,
I said, Dad, I'm gonna be him myself.
I'm just talking about what the Torah says.
but never disciplining them.
No, it's good
Scripture's
to
very clear that you
discipline,
hate
you
them.
discipline a kid, but not to a point to hurt a kid, you know, that's,
If you're disciplining your children, the scripture's very clear. If you
Yeah.
spare the rod, you hate your children.
I know that's not funny. And
you
the
get,
kids
all
are like-
sitting down there going,
the kids are like, oh my goodness. But I'm just literally quoting Proverbs.
guys, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know.
23 verse 13. Here's what it says, just in case somebody thought, oh my goodness, Rael's so harsh. It says in Proverbs, Mishlei chapter 23 verse 13, don't withhold discipline from a child. If you beat him with a stick, he won't die. I just literally quoted it, just so you know.
Hey, the Torah says so. We don't say it.
Just don't beat him with a stick till he dies.
And it says, if you beat him with a stick, you'll save him from Sheol. That's the next verse on it.
So how much are you loving your child if you beat him with a stick and save him from Sheol? I mean, really, if you're saving your child from hell,
Going back to
So this is examples that, if I simply agreed with God, even if I didn't have the wisdom to understand it myself, but I said, you know what, God's wise, I'm agree with anything. Even if, I was that child, I'd be like, okay, I agree, this is something that should be done. Even if the Torah says I should be put to death, if that was God's will, He knows. Then I would agree that His will is the best, even if it would have meant my own death. I would, so when it comes to, loving your neighbor as yourself, or treat others as you want to be treated, I would, even if I had to be put to death because I did something that was deserving and it would be detrimental to society for how that to happen, if I had a right mind, I would agree God's right and wrong. I do deserve it because God is just, God's loving, and so on. So that has to be the foundation of the heart of the beginning of loving neighbor as yourself and treat others as you can. Well, any other thoughts before we close the prayer? We'll stop talking about beating our children.
No more,
we're gonna quit talking about it,
Yeah.
we're gonna start doing it.
No way.
Just kidding.
No, he has to be kids.
That's because we don't spread the word. You know, it's like,
That is good. I love it. I love it.
All right, well, let's close the prayer. Well,
Rabbi, you do me a great favor. Something that my heart is telling me. Can you anoint the children for me? And then you pray for them? This is oil from Jerusalem, period. Anoint the kids. I want you to anoint the children.
This
And
is
the young man there.
frankincense, spikenard, and something else.
Anoint the children.
And it smells very good.
Anoint the children. This is going to be our future.
We're going to anoint you guys, the scripture says, and pray prosperity and healing for anything that you may have. It smells good too, so. Mr. Emmy.
They get anointed. It's good. In Jerusalem.
I was getting away. Bruce hiding back.
Bruce, go get him up there. It's good. It's in Jerusalem. It's in Yeshua.
Hey, Bruce, he's hiding from you.
All right, let's pray. Being okay, we just want to lift up our children to you, Father. We just ask that you would really especially bless them. Father, we ask that you would heal them, Father, of anything that they have, whether it be injury, Father, Father, whether it be any type of sickness, Father, whether it be physical or spiritual. Father, we ask that you prosper them and that you truly draw them close to you, Father, and to your precepts, Father, that they truly may rejoice and prosper and, Father, be rich in you. And so, Father, we just pray that they would be the next generation, Father, that would see this happen, Father, and they'd be happy to healthy families. And we just thank you, Father, for our time to study on them,